There, welcome to the blog. Today we're going to be looking at a new Pro Tools 8 feature called plugin mapping. Now it's definitely Christmas out there for the D-Command users amongst you because you guys are really getting the lion's share of fantastic new features and workflows being switched on for you in Pro Tools 8. This one is one of the really groovy ones for D-Command specifically because up until now you haven't been able to open plugins on the two pots at the top of your channel scripts. And every time you focused on a plugin, it would open it up in the custom fader plugin map over here. So you didn't have the benefit of a D-control where you could leave, for example, your compressors, threshold and release on those pots while you moved around the mix, come back to it and quickly grab in there. You always had to focus things across into the center section. Not anymore. Merry Christmas from Digi. So, looking at this feature in detail, what I'm going to do is start off with a couple of plugins that don't map into the center section of the console, for example, Real Tape Suite and Revibe, and show you how, with a bit of mouse work and a bit of icon touchy-feely, we can make a map and get our system rolling quite well. So, let's focus up on Real Tape Suite. Now, first of all, over in my preferences, I have switched on two new preferences on the D command. One of them is being able to open up my plugins on the channel strip. And the second one I have switched on is the final operational pref called Touch Learn. I'll come back to those probably in another blog looking at all the new preferences and bits and pieces like that. But just be aware that those prefs have to be on for this workflow to happen. So in here, let's open up Real Tape Suite. You'll note straight away that it's opened it up on my pots, which is new in Pro Tools 8. Up here we've got our GUI showing us what's going on, and I decide that, okay, well, even though, Digi have been kind enough to give me a map for how this works on the channel, I don't like that, and I want to make my own map. So all I have to do is mouse up here and click on the Learn button, and you'll see two things happen. Firstly, my D command will now bring across into custom fader plugin mode. So I've got that set to 4 faders at the moment, so it doesn't take up all of my space. So that's gone blank, and you'll also see that the two pots on the channel strip where I focused have gone blank as well. From here, all I simply do is click on the parameter with my mouse, for example, the drive. It says that the drive is now being mapped, it's in learn mode, and if I touch the pot, my drive comes up on that pot. Do the same thing for output, and so on. Now I can page up to the next page, and I'm going to stick in, say, my bass and treble here. So bass there, and treble on the top pot. Let's come back to my first page and have a look at a couple of options in here with the buttons. Now, if I want to switch on my beat per minute sync, I'll just click on the on button there, so it's ready to go, and I can now map that to a bypass mute pre button as well. So that'll be on my first button there on this map, like so. I might also wish to toggle on my machine with the BMP button up here on the output. Let's put that there. And let's just say that that'll do me for the time being. So looking at my map here, as I hit the BMP button, you'll see that the sync is switching on and off. I've also got this BMP button here for my machine type. I've got my drive, and I've got my output on the first page, and as I page across, I've got my bass and treble for the sound of that delay, and I can map in other parameters up there. So that's mapping with real tape delay. Let's flick everybody back over into their plugin modes now. And I'm going to dive into Revibe and go through that one last time with Revibe. So I'm going to open this up. And we'll go into Learn mode. I've got my two pots free, so I can click in on my wet dry, for example, and put that there on my first pot. And I can put in my 100% mix button on the BMP for that. And I may want to put in my reverb type on the top pot and page across and map in the reverb time and the pre-delay, like so. Excellent, that'll do me for that exercise. So there we go, we've got our time, we've got our pre-delay, and on the first page I can also toggle between wet dry mix and exactly where I'm doing with my reverb type. So that's quite usable. I mean, I can move that around all over the place and it will stay where it is. Let's open up a couple more plugins here and have a look at how they work. Now, the second preference that I mentioned that I switched on is called Touch Learn. Touch Learn is specifically for when you choose to map EQ and compression plugins that are available in the focused section of the console. So in this case, I'm going to open up the ePure plugin and create a map for that. Now when I do this, let's focus on ePure. There it is there. I'll hit Learn. That'll pop across, but now ePure is also mapped across here in my EQ section. So I can actually do a very simple process here of going, all right, we've hit Learn, let's learn my bottom end by touching it there in the EQ section and map it onto that pot. I'll put my frequency on the top pot. And here's another very cool function of plugin mapping, is that if I hit the select switch, it gives me a second function that I can put on the same pot. So there are 2 layers per page. If I page up, I can move on to other pages, but on this particular pot, I'm also now going to put in my cue on there, and I'll put in my shape on the BMP button on that page. So I toggle back, there's my gain. Oop, I'm touching that, let me get out of my learn mode. So there's my gain or peaking, shelving. I've got my BMP button for what shape I'm using, and I've got my frequency up here. And I could go through that and map it in a very consistent way across those pages. So one page deals with all of the parameters for my low pass filters, one page deals with all my high pass filters, and so on and so forth. So that completes a bit of a quick tour around the plugin mapping functions in Pro Tools 8. Hopefully that's useful, and I'll be coming back for more Pro Tools 8 goodness over the coming weeks. Enjoy your Christmas if you don't speak to me or hear any of my videos between now and then. Speak to you soon. Bye-bye. Hi there, welcome to the blog. Today we're going to be looking at another feature of Icon in Pro Tools 8, which is to do with how we can scan through our inputs and outputs on a channel, see where they are assigned, what their inputs and outputs are, and also we can interrogate forwards and backwards through the signal flow, which is very, very useful. So to get into this feature, all we need to do is basically hold down the sends button on our channel for 3 seconds. When we do that, it'll flip over on that channel and we'll see our input and output on the top and the bottom of our D command here. I'm going to do this across the whole mixer, so holding down Option, Sends, bang. I can now see all of my inputs and all of my outputs down the bottom here. If I want to see which channels are being assigned to this particular output, so look downstream, I simply hold my finger on the pot and any of the select buttons will flash to show me where it's going to. If I hold my finger on the input, I can see things which are being fed into that input. So let's do a little bit of assigning here. We'll just jump into our assigning modes here. Let's assign it to, instead of an interface, we'll make it back up and we'll make it a bus. So let's choose bus 10 just for the heck of it. And over here, we'll choose a couple of these channels and assign their outputs all to bus 10. So outputs, let's go back up, bus, do to selected. Where are they? Bus 10 should be here. There it is there. Done. Okay, so a couple of these are going to bus 10 and bus 10 now comes in over here. If I hold my finger on bus 10, you'll see that the select lights are now flashing on those channels. Now if I want to have it locked in that state so that those lights are flashing, maybe for things that are off the visible number of faders that you have here, I just simply double tap. And that will leave it in that state while I can then move things around and you'll see exactly which channels are flashing which have been assigned to that input. Last but not least, we also have another one which is quite useful, another feature that's quite useful, which is holding down the shift modifier while we touch an output or an input, and we can see other channels that are assigned to the same output or to the same input. So if I was to hold down shift and touch mix, I'll see an awful lot of faders here flashing, telling me that all of these channels have the same output. And again, double tap will keep it there in that state, and I can see who's been assigned to that output. If I want to see things that have been assigned to the same input, then simply holding down my finger on there with the shift key will show me any channels that have also been assigned to audio 4, of which there's none. So yeah, that's the I/O view and being able to interrogate backwards and forwards through your signal path. To get into that, all we did was simply hold our sends button down for a number of seconds, and that will then pop me into that view. And if you hold down the option key at the same time, then that will put the whole console into the same view, and you can see all of your inputs and outputs that way. Hope that's useful. Thanks for visiting the blog. See you soon. Hi there, welcome to the blog. Today we're going to be looking at ways of navigating around Pro Tools using the custom fader group on your icon. Now there are 4 different ways of using the custom fader section. Firstly, you can access members of Pro Tools groups within your session. So for example, all of these mix groups over here on the left hand side. If I were to hit the groups button in my custom fader section here, which is the top button on a D command, second button on a D control, I can jump in and I can see straight away the members of groups within my session. So keep in mind that members of a group could be anywhere in your mix. They might be tracks 1, 3, 7, 32 and 48, but they'll all come up next to each other here in the sweet spot of the console in the custom fader section. The soft keys over here on the right hand side then let me navigate by group, so I can jump from my strings over to say my piano group, or maybe to my bass or my electric guitars, quite a few of them in this session. So you can quickly get to members of your groups within Pro Tools. This is quite a good thing for navigating, particularly if you've got a session being prepped for you in an earlier room, like an LE system or something like that, and they've been able to make the groups for you. Jump into the icon and you can navigate by those groups quickly and easily. So that's navigating using the Pro Tools groups. Secondly, you can navigate by using custom fader groups. So these are custom groups that you're making yourself on the console. So for me to jump into those, on a D control, you'll find that there's actually a button up here in the custom fader section called custom. You would hit the custom button and then the bank over on the right hand side 1 through 12 would allow you to edit all of your custom groups. On a D command, however, we're missing that button, so we've just got the groups button here that does both tasks. Groups will get into your Pro Tools groups or into your custom groups, but you need to know how to toggle between those two states. So I've just jumped out of custom fader mode, and if I hold the groups button for 3 seconds, all of my groups will now come up onto the pots at the top of the console, and you'll see that the bank cycle button is lit. This allows me to simply bank between Pro Tools groups and flick over into my custom group mode. So from here, I've now got custom group 7 visible there. If I were to jump in, I've got my cues. Custom group 8, excellent, has no members. So to edit a custom group, I simply hold down the Apple key on a Mac and hit groups. You'll see the groups light start to flash, and I can hit select on any of my channels here on the left hand side, and you'll see them all coming in the order that I touch them. So I could be navigating right up from one end of my session to another, jumping all over the place, and still be able to jump into those groups and into those channels and add them into my custom fader group. So that's now custom fader group 8 has just been created there. So that's Pro Tools groups and custom groups. The third mode going down is to navigate by track type. Pretty straightforward. Basically, when you create a new track in Pro Tools, if I open up the new track dialog here, let me have a look. If I go to a new track, you'll see that we have audio tracks, auxiliaries, master faders, VCAs, MIDI tracks, and instrument tracks. All of those can be brought up here in the custom fader section by using the tracks mode. So in tracks, you can see on the right hand side now, I've got instrument tracks, VCA masters. I can also show my auxiliary tracks here. So that's just bringing up my auxiliaries into the center section. VCAs is quite useful because one of the other features on the board, if you navigate by VCAs, the bypass spill buttons are all lit on your VCAs, and if you hit the bypass button, it acts as a spill button, and so you'll be able to dive into the members of that VCA's groups. So for example, here's the string VCA. If I hit the spill button on that VCA, it now opens up just the members of the string section or the string group which it's controlling. So you can see that it toggles between the group function. I can flick back over to track, find my VCA and go, yep, let's jump into the bass. No, actually, let's get my keys. And so I can quickly navigate around by diving between the 2 layers of the mix, the VCA layer and then the slaves inside those VCAs. That's quite useful if you're limited to the track count that you've got or the channel count that you have on your icon. So for example, I had an 8 fader D command in the office here for quite some time, and that was the best way for me to navigate around a large session, was to add VCAs to my groups and then simply dive between the VCAs and the members of the VCA groups. So we've looked at Pro Tools groups, we've looked at custom fader groups, and lastly looked at navigating by track type. The fourth mode is to navigate by plugin, and if you look at the blog video from last week, we had quite a bit of time on custom fader plugin mode, navigating around by plugins and mapping out our plugins. So hopefully that gives you a good idea of the way that the custom fader section works and how you can navigate around your session using it. Thanks for visiting the blog. Speak to you again soon. Hi there, welcome to the blog. Today we're going to be looking at another new feature in Pro Tools 8 specifically for Icon called the assignment matrix. Now basically the idea behind this is to make the method that we use for assigning plugins and sends in a very consistent fashion, as well as inputs and outputs to a certain degree. So today in this video we're going to be looking at assigning plugins and sends and the different ways of using the assignment matrix in this instance. So if I have a look at everything here, there's my pan. If I switch over into Insert View, another new feature in Pro Tools 8 is we have letters indicating which slot we are on with our plugins. So I've got a bunch of tracks selected here. I'm going to choose any of them and open up my assignment matrix by selecting a plugin slot. This now opens up my assignment matrix. What we can see here on the top left-hand pot is the name of the track. The second pot here shows me the insert that I'm inserting on, and that's the left-hand bank, so it's a navigation bank here on the left. On the right-hand side, this channel here is showing me my lock function and my exit. So this will become one of the key pots that you're using for navigation around on the right-hand side here. In the middle, we have the section which updates depending on as we dive through to assign different functions. So in this instance, I want to put in an EQ across my selected tracks. So I'm going to dive into TDM, RTAS, or hardware insert. I'm going to go choose TDM, EQ, and I'll choose, let's have a look here. Maybe my Jomic. If I want to read the description of exactly what things are, because they're all looking a little bit similar, I just simply touch the pot and I can see them as they steal scribble strips from their neighbors. In this case, I want to put in the Jomic equalizer across my selected tracks. So I'll hit do to selected and then hit the select button. And that's now going to assign it across my channels. Done. That's now taken me out of the assignment matrix and back to Inserts View. I want to put in now some compressors across these tracks as well. I'll choose something else from here. Say we'll shift click over to there. First 8 tracks, and we'll dive into slot B, and it opens up the assignment matrix one more time. TDM, Dynamics. Let's choose, what have we got there? The Bomb Factory, the BF76. Why not? Do to selected. Now before I do this, I'm going to lock my assignment matrix in place so that I can keep using it to assign other things. So now that it's locked, I'll go do to selected, hit my BF76. We'll assign the 76 across those tracks, as you can see there. And now on my final couple of tracks up here, I want to shift click on those and put in a couple of other plugins. So let's go back up a level, back to my assignment matrix to the categories, and I want to put in some reverbs now. So let's dive into my reverbs, and I'll use the old revibe. So I'll go do to selected, revibe. Yep, I can change. And that'll put it across those slots there. So quickly and easily navigating around and putting in different plugins as we need to. So that's that. Let's now step back out of this, exit out, and look at how we can put in some sends, which is in much the same way. It'll look very similar to you. So we have our send indicators here in the letters. I'm going to choose my top slot here, slot A, audio 10, and in this instance, I want to choose all of my tracks and put in a headphone send. So we'll go send A, yep, to a bus. Let's scroll across here to an unused bus, 15, 17, 18, let's do that one. Do to selected, 17, 18, but before I do, I'll hit lock on that. 17, 18 now goes across all of those channels. On this one through here, I now want to send on a different slot. Say let's go slot B, and I want to put in a bus send for a delay in this case. We'll go to 15, 16 for the heck of it. There we go. There we go. And last but not least, on this particular track here, let's go up to audio, send C. On this particular track here, audio 12, select it and move around to audio 12, There we go. In this case, I want to send this out to multiple interface outputs. So I'm going to change the interface for it here and select it to my queue as well as something else. So firstly, I'll assign it to the queue like that. And you'll notice that up here on the top right hand corner, we have our lock button. There's also a plus symbol next to this. If I hit the B and P, that's the same as the old modifier, the control modifier, so I can now send to multiple outputs. So I'll send it to my Q mix, and I'll also send it to audio 1314 as well. You can see a plus sign comes up there, and that particular output's going off to multiple outs on that send. So yeah, that gives you a pretty good idea, hopefully, of how the assignment matrix can be used to navigate around to send out your sends and your plugins. And in the next blog topic, we'll look at having a look at inputs and outputs and things like this. So thanks for visiting the blog. Speak to you all soon. Bye-bye. Hi there, welcome to the blog. Today we're going to be looking at ways of using snapshot-based automation with your Digidesign icon console. So the way this rolls is pretty straightforward. What I've done here is simply open up the snapshot menu on my console, and up the top we can see the capture and punch capture functions. Underneath them we have our snapshots that we have in cache. So to show how this works, let's just get the transport rolling with automation being writing, and once automation is writing, we can then start to capture those states across the board. So I've got everything rolling here in latch mode, and we have everything down at infinity, and I'm now going to capture that as a state. So I'll just hit the capture button and then hold that into snapshot 1. So it's been added. And then let's bring everything up here to 0, like so. And I'm now going to capture that state as well and save that into snapshot 2. Next one is just going to be all my alternate faders here, just for the heck of it. We'll save that in, capture that. There's snapshot 3. And lastly, say a progressive sort of fade down across these. So first half up, second half down, like so. And we'll capture that state and put that in as snapshot 4. Now that we've captured our snapshots, we can then punch them simply by priming them, like snapshot 1, and hit punch capture, and that will assume that state. Snapshot 2 will assume that state. Snapshot 4, punch capture. Snapshot 3, punch capture. Snapshot 4, snapshot 1, punch capture, and so on. So the process that you can see here that I'm using with my right hand is to select the snapshot so that it is primed and the button is lit, and then punch capture to make the state be assumed on the console. And that's pretty much our snapshot functions within the icon. Now, once we've done that, we can then auto match back into our existing automation. Another function of using these snapshots is that they can also be used outside of real time. So I can use them by highlighting a selection. So in this case, I'm just going to highlight a selection here on screen, like so. And because I've got latch prime in stop enabled in my preferences, this means that I can simply grab snapshot 3 and punch it, and it will assume that state, and then I can hit write to all across that area, and it will write it across my selection like so. So lots of different ways of using snapshots. Anyway, thanks for visiting the blog. Speak to you soon. Bye. Hi there, welcome to the blog. Today we're going to be looking at a feature of the custom fader section on the D command, which has been given significantly more power in Pro Tools 8, specifically on the D command. Now on D control, for some time now, we've had the ability to map down parameters from plugins into a custom fader group. On a D command, this wasn't possible because we could never open the plugins on the pots that you would see up here on a channel by channel basis. With Pro Tools 8, we now have the ability of opening up our plugins or inserts on the channel, which gives us the ability to in turn map them down into the custom fader section. So let's go through this process. If I simply hit the groups button, I've got my preferences set to min 8, which means that as I add faders into my custom fader group, it's going to add them moving across the console, and you'll see the blue lights come on as we go. So to edit this group, I'm going to command click on groups, and we'll put in a bunch of copies of, say, audio 9 in this instance. So let's put in audio 9. Now I'm going to hold down shift and select audio 9 again several times, and next put in audio 10 and 11 just for the sake of the exercise. So I've got 3 different channels here. If we have a look at that, you'll see that these are all copies of exactly the same channel. Then I've got audio 10 and 11 next to it. If I want to rename this group, it's simply Option, click on Groups on the D command, and I can call this Reverb, or whatever case may be. I can see that pops up here in the scribble strip. So onto the functions of mapping. We already looked at how you can use plugin mapping on the console up here. As we can see in Inserts view, there's Revibe across these channels. So let's open that up. I'm going to open up Revibe on these channels here. So I'm going to keep this one here as my main fader, but on these 4 faders, I'm going to flip down parameters from Revibe onto my faders. So if I hold down the map key for 3 seconds, this will now allow me to say, take my time properties and flip them down here. There's my time properties. I can bring down my wet dry properties here as well. And if I page up, I can also grab the size of my room onto this fader, and let's bring down the, what else have we got here? My pre-delay as well. So there's my pre-delay. So this is now the fader for that particular channel. I then have the time, wet dry size, and pre-delay for the reverb, which is on that channel. I then have a second fader and a third fader, which might be, for example, the auxiliary returns and the master bus fader, for example. So it gives you a lot of power in your groups here, that if I now have my mix, anytime I want to grab into that custom fader group, hit the groups button, and it will punch things across and bring them in here to the sweet spot, giving you a mixture of plugin parameters, sends, returns, whatever else you need down into this group. So hopefully that's useful. Thanks for visiting the blog, and speak to you all soon. Hi there, welcome to the blog. Today we're going to be looking at preview mode, which is this button here in the automation window. That's Apple 4 for that particular window. I've also mapped it over here onto my icon on the user soft keys there, so I can toggle it on and off at will. What is preview mode? Preview mode is about auditioning a change to your automation. Audition typically used in latch mode, when you're latching an automation parameter, and it will continue to hold that parameter while you move on and audition other things. So it allows you to audition an automation change in the context of your mix without suspending a global state. So let's say if you wanted to suspend all of your volume automation just so that you could audition a slight change in the volumes. The problem with that is that obviously you're losing the context of your mix. Take it a step further when you're talking about EQs and things, and it's even messier. So let's look at a way of working with preview with a loop playback. So I've got loop playback engaged, I've got preview switched on, and when I hit playback on this particular track, I can now jump in there and play with the EQ to my heart's content. And you'll see that as it cycles over the loop point, it holds the state that I'm playing with here. As soon as I grabbed any of my parameters on the icon, it's gone green to indicate that this track is now in preview. With an icon, you can map down these features and simply suspend your preview to go back to the state that it was in before, and then back to your manual control of the preview state. And if you're happy with that, simply hit write to all with your automation write to commands and print that across your selection. Pardon me. If I move down here, I can now simply grab another region and do the same thing. Might be something completely different, or in fact something much the same, just make some radical changes here to my sounds, and when I'm happy with that and go, yep, that's actually what I'm after, just hit write to all, and it prints it across that selection. So you can see here now that my automation has been written there and there according to my regions. So let's take it a step further and go, what about the churn and burn kind of workflow, where guys have a whole heap of presets set up for particular sound and they need to stamp them across a region using automation? Because obviously stamping with automation in this fashion, you don't have to render anything, so it's instantaneous. It's a lot faster than using things like Audio Suite plugins to apply changes. So you need to print a bunch of scene-based automation through your session. It might be something as simple as going, right, this region here, I want this to sound like it's coming through a radio. So I can grab my EQ. Now again, because I have preview mode switched on, I can listen to things in context before I write them. And I've also switched on one other preference in here, which is latch prime and stop. Latch prime and stop is really powerful with preview because it allows you to simply make a change, audition it, and then write it immediately. So in here I can grab my presets such as let's say an Auratone, the old Horatone, print that EQ sound across there. I can have a listen to it, see if I like the sound of that.
And the well don't trickle down.
Yep, that works for me, and just simply hit write to all and write it straight away. And if I'm happy with that, I could grab multiple areas here, flip them all over to the Horatone, and go, yep, all of them have to be written right to all. And in one press of a button, I'm just writing those pieces of automation across all three regions there, so you can see that's now being written across all. So that's preview mode. It can be used in both ways, can be used in real time to free you up from the constraints of your existing automation, allowing you to audition things in the context of your mix, so you don't have to constantly keep suspending your automation. Leave your automation switched on, switch on preview, and then when you're finished with previewing the change that you want to go, just use your write to functions to write it across your selection. So definitely check out preview. Really handy feature. I hope you guys enjoyed, and welcome. Thanks for visiting the blog. Talk to you all soon. Bye. Hey there, welcome to the blog. Today we're going to be looking at the icon preferences. So looking at in particular, this is going to be on a D command. Those of you on a D control, unfortunately I don't have one here in the studio, so I can't go through all of the specific minutiae of the D control. You will find obviously a lot of commonality, however, between the D command and the D control, so I beg your forgiveness, but I'm going to have to tweak this towards a D command. Some of them are specific to a D command in the way that you would operate, because it is a much smaller form factor console in that you can reach, you know, a 24 fader configuration, you can pretty much reach across the whole board. So that influences some of my choices. Anyway, let's have a look here. So what I'm going to do is basically dive in by hitting the console preferences operation button just here. And it brings up our preferences there on the board. So the first page, if we have a look through them, you've got the important parts here. First of all is focus strip. Currently I have that switched to off. When it's on, if we have a look over here on the console, and just zoom out accordingly. So you can just see there on the board, when I'm toggling the focus strip on and off, it's basically stealing a fader from me. So I paid for 24 faders, I want all 24, I don't want 23. Basically this is just, if you're on a 24 fader D command, you'll find that generally you should be able to reach every fader on the board, and I don't see, personally, my personal taste is not to have a duplicate fader of the one that I'm currently focused on, so I always turn that off. That's on by default. Moving back across in here to the preferences panel, pardon the camera work. Okay, so other components here is our justification for the custom faders. Do we want them to pop up on the right of the console or on the left of the console? Or from the center position, left of the center position, or right of the center position? So that's all just your bank justification, your custom fader justification. This is just tweaking where things reside on your board. Moving across to the next page, this is really just focusing on the ones that I tweak when I set up a system. So I'll move through to the second page. You've got all of your custom fader groups specific to how many faders they're going to steal when you go into that mode. So do you want them to be on the default of 8? I always tend to switch them over to minimum of 8. That basically means that it will only use the minimum required up to a maximum of 8 before you go to the bank cycle button and have to toggle through them. Other components here tend to leave pretty much the way they are. Channel window is just saying that the plugins will follow your channel selection on screen. An app target is to do with the select buttons, that when you select in the application, it mirrors your selection on the console itself. Moving across, okay, so some of the more fun ones here. I always turn this on. So this is called solo focus, and it basically means that whenever you hit the solo button, you'll be able to focus that fader into the center section, into your dynamics and EQ center section. That to me is a really intuitive way of working. So I always switch that on. Solo focus means that you don't have to keep toggling between the, moving back across here, so in here you've got the solo mode, the selection mode, whether you're in select or focus. Most people tend to operate in focus to move things into the middle of the board. With solo focus switched on, you can stay in select mode, which means I can select multiple faders, but when I hit fader across into my center section here, to me, as I say, that's much more intuitive way of working. So focusing back in again here. Woo. They employ me for my ears, not my camera skills. Okay, so what else have we got here? Custom fader tracks, show hidden. This is personal preference as well. It's on hide hidden by default. Show hidden to me means it removes the custom fader group again from what's going on inside your Pro Tools session. So it means that when you've got, say, all of your dialogues in a custom fader group, you may be looking at the music beds in Pro Tools and you've just shown the music group, but when you focus on the dialogue group in your custom fader section, you'll still be able to control and mix those faders even though they're not directly visible inside the Pro Tools GUI. So it gives you that extra layer of optimization of who's operating the board versus who's looking at what's going on inside Pro Tools. Show hidden just gives you an extra layer of separation there. Two knob pan can often come in really handy as well. If you're doing surround work on a D command, you've got two pots there to work with. So it basically gives you your front back on the first two pots. What else have we got here? Okay, here's an important one that came in Pro Tools 8. Channel plugins on or off. Now the default is off. That's the legacy behavior for a D command. Personally, I love the fact that I now have decontrol functionality on my D command, and this means that I can open up my plugins on the actual channels themselves, and I can leave them there, and then you get the option of using all of your new channel mapping features in Pro Tools 8, your plugin mapping features, to put your favorite two parameters onto the two pots and start driving this board directly, on the console, rather than having to focus things all the time and bring them across into the custom fader section, custom fader plugin section. So to me, channel plugins, switch that on. It's just a no-brainer. I always want to have that switched on. Moving through, we've got all the preferences for your assignment matrix. I just tend to leave those as default. And Learn Touch is to do with your assignment, your plugin mapping. To me, that's quite handy to have that switched on. It means that you can be focused on creating a plugin map, and you can simply touch the parameter on the EQ or the dynamics section and then map it across onto the faders. So Learn Touch is also quite a useful one. So that's pretty much the 5-minute blaze through all of the icon preferences that, as I say, personal taste. I think that they're really important ones to tweak on a new system. The only other thing that I'd go through now in this video is using your user button. You can see this here. User button to me is one of the most powerful features of an icon when you're first setting it up, is to get in there and tweak this. If we go into our automation actions, we have things like preview functions, capture functions. We also then have our write to commands, a bunch of different automation functions in there. And in the modes, one of my favorite modes here is auto join, which we don't have a dedicated button for that on a D command, and that's something that I quite like to turn on and off depending on when I'm mixing. So the first thing, again, one of the earliest things that I do on a D command is tweak these into the user page. So you can see the selection that I've made here. Let's make a second page just for the heck of it. So I'll go into my actions and I'm going to hold down the command key and press the button that I'm after. So in this case, it's going to be preview. So I'll zoom out a little bit so you can see what I'm doing. So holding down the Apple key on my Mac and hit preview, and you'll see that it pops up saying added. And preview suspend is another good one to have there. I'll then go into my write to commands and put in write to all. So I'm visualizing that this is going to appear in my user page directly underneath preview, which is where I want it. So I'll put write to all in there, and then maybe I'll put in write to next to that as well. Write to start can be quite useful as well, or I might want to go into my capture modes if I wanted to go down that path. So we might want to put in capture there, and last but not least, the auto join. So now if I jump into my user page here, you'll see on this page we now have configured those 6 functions from various different menus all onto the one page. From preview suspend, with the write to all directly underneath it, so I can go into preview, then hit write to all as much as I want. Write to next is there. My capture button if I want to start capturing some snapshots, although the snapshot button's there obviously to get into that if you want. And auto join there, ready to go from the surface. So yeah, that would be everything that I have to throw at you for this quick icon preferences bootcamp. Hopefully that's of use to people who are just getting involved in icon, and some of the more experienced users, who knows, you may have picked up on an idea or two. So thanks for visiting the blog, and chat to you all soon. Bye.
Hey, I'm Jeff Komar. I'm an application specialist with Avid, and welcome back to our Avid Pro Mixing series. In this session, we're going to focus in on D-Command. A lot of you have expressed interest in getting more information about working specifically on the D-Command console, and that's what we're going to do. We have a 24-fader D-Command here today, and we're going to dive in and really take advantage of doing everything from the console, be it from session management to working with plugins. And along the way, we're going to take a look at some really cool workflow enhancements by setting up templates and creating views and managing the way that you work in Pro Tools from the console. So let's get started. Let's start by doing an overview of the console and take a look at the primary sections that we have. The first thing we're going to look at are channel strips. And our channel strips are comprised of 2 touch-sensitive encoders with switched functions. Below that, we have our view mode indicators, and this allows us to change between, for example, inserts, pan, sends, or I/O views. We're going to look at that in more depth a little bit later. Every channel strip also features a dedicated track arming button and input monitor toggle button. We have selects, solo, and mutes, and then our scribble strip, which can be toggled to a number of different views depending on what we need to see. Below that, we've got dedicated automation mode functions, as well as trim mode. And we have a series of LEDs that indicate what automation mode we're in, as well as if this is a member of a Pro Tools group and the group is active, a custom fader group, and then finally auto match indicators to allow us to see where we're at relative to the automation on disk. Just to the right of the channel strips, we have our global strip. And on the global strip, we have functions like automation write tos, automation enable functions, do to all, do to selected, and then our custom fader controls, which are below, we're going to get into in more detail. Just to the right of the master strip, we have our dedicated dynamics and EQ control panels. These offer predictable control over any compressor limiter, expander gate, or EQ plugin, whether it's an Avid plugin or a third-party manufacturer. Just to the right of the dynamics and EQ section, we have our monitor control panel. And this allows us to access all of the control room functions for inputs, output sources, speakers, cues, and talkback. Below the monitor control panel is our soft keys section. And soft keys is a matrix of different types of functions organized logically in a grid. Whether you want to get to track-based functions, MIDI, automation, or general session management, it's all nested within the soft keys. Below the soft keys, we have a zoom navigation panel, allows us to zoom on waveform regions as well as navigate tab between regions. Window management next to that, basic mix, edit, plugin, panning, and workspace windows. And finally, we have the transport section. Transport section offers us a jog shuttle wheel, transport functions, record and playback modes, as well as back and play and mark in, mark out. Okay, so let's talk about some basic session navigation. I've got about 85 tracks in this music session. I need to be able to get around on the desk. I have 24 faders. How do I do that? Well, the first thing we need to look at is the bank nudge panel here, just to the right of the jog shuttle wheel. If I use the bank functions, it's going to allow me to chunk through in 24 fader increments, since I have 24 faders. If I want to go one by one, I would use the nudge function. You can see my channels moving across the desk. You can also go and simply hold on one of these buttons, either nudge or bank, and grab the jog wheel. That's a nice way to quickly roll through and find what you're looking for on the desk. Now, unlike D-Control, D-Command does not have a dedicated home function. Now, we're going to be using modifiers quite a bit through this session, and just at the bottom of the channel strip on each fader pack, we have modifiers for Shift, Control, Option, and Command for the Macintosh. I'm going to use the modifier Option and press the bank button to jump to home so that my leftmost fader is at the first fader position. Let's talk about managing your view a little bit from the desk. Now, we took a look at banking and nudging with the jog wheel. We can also do view management by using the jog data wheel as well. Using the modifiers in conjunction with the wheel, there's a number of different critical functions we can perform. If we hold down Command and grab the jog shuttle wheel, we can actually zoom dynamically into our audio waveforms. If we grab Option, we can scroll horizontally. Shift, we can scroll vertically. And Command Option, we can actually zoom the waveforms right from the jog wheel. Now, just below the Audition section, we have Mark In and Mark Out buttons. Mark In allows me to set an in point for a selection. Mark Out is the out point. And if I press them both, I can actually move that selection down my timeline by simply holding the jog shuttle wheel. To clear the selection, you can use Option and press either one of those. And now I'm actually moving my playhead through the piece to figure out where I want to edit or play from. Let's take a look now at some basic functions like selecting channels and focusing a target channel. On the center section of the global strip, we have a Select/Focus Mode toggle button. If we're in Select, we can make a selection on channels by holding down one channel and selecting multiples. We can also use the Command key modifier to select or deselect multiple channels. If you want to make a selection that's contiguous, you can press one channel, hold down the Shift modifier, and press the last channel to span that range. Okay, so let's talk about focusing a little bit. If I toggle from Select to Focus Mode, I can no longer make a selection. I can only choose one particular channel strip. What Focus is doing for me is it's targeting the selected channel. If I choose Snare, for example, it's going to bring a mirror image of that to my last fader of the main unit. This is called a focus fader. It's a preference, it's an option that's turned on by default in the console preferences. D-Command does not offer a dedicated focus strip as D-Control does, but we can repurpose the last fader to be able to give me that control. And what we're getting now with focus is the ability to look at our snare track and also control the dynamics in the EQ on that channel from the dedicated panels. Now that we know the basics of selecting and focusing, let's talk about some alternative strategies to focusing channels on the desk. I personally like to show the Show Hide Tracks display in Pro Tools so that I can access the track numbers just to the left of my edit window. If I use this in conjunction with the Go To function here, I can bring any track in this session to me on the focus channel instantly. Let's go and grab one of those channels. I'm going to go and grab the lead vocal, which is Daryl, track number 49. I can go and press Go To. Pro Tools asks me what track I'd like to focus. I'm going to go and press 49, hit OK, and now it's brought Daryl, the lead vocal channel, right to me in the focus fader here. It's loaded in the First Dynamics processor and also the API 550 EQ into the EQ panel that I can access. The last one I'd like to mention is the ability to actually stay in select mode and to be able to focus channels. So if I go and hold down the Shift Control modifiers, I can focus a channel while still in select. It allows me to not have to keep toggling between focus and select modes. Okay, let's take a deeper look at the center section, specifically the EQ panel. To do that, I'm going to first focus the first acoustic guitar on the console by pressing the Select key while in focus mode. I'm going to bring up the EQ3/4 band that's on that channel, and the center section EQ panel perfectly fits to what we're seeing on the screen. The high band is at the far right, gain, frequency, and Q. I can toggle between parametric and shelving for the high band. Next, we've got high-mid band parametric, gain, frequency, and Q. Next, our low-mid band, gain, frequency, and Q. And finally, our low shelf or low parametric for that plugin. If I want to null this or basically zero it, I can hold down the Option key and simply swipe all my gains, and now I'm back to a flat curve. Also, by pressing the Cycle button within the EQ panel, I can cycle between the different plugins that happen to be on that track. Now, you may want to use EQ3, for example, to do carving and do basic frequency manipulation, and then perhaps use something like McDSP Channel G or an API 550 for more tone or more vibe on that particular channel. The beautiful thing about this is that whether I'm using McDSP plugin, Waves, or DigiRack, the controls are exactly the same. Now let's take a look at a 7-band EQ and see how that is controlled from the center section. Again, we've got our high band, gain, frequency, and Q, high mid, gain, frequency, and Q, our low mid, gain, frequency, and Q, and our low band gain, frequency, and Q. If we hit the page button, on the second page at the far left and the far right, we have our high-pass filter and our low-pass filter. So we also have band enables to engage those filters. So the high-pass filter now is turned on. Here's my frequency, and here's the slope of that filter. Likewise, at the far right, we have a low-pass filter. Here's our frequency, and here's our slope. All of my encoders are touch sensitive. Now, if I'm not sure what I'm using for the slope, I can touch the knob and it says, hey, you're at 6, 12, 18, or 24 dB per octave. Since this is a 7-band, there's one more center or mid-parametric band in the middle that I can control, gain, frequency, and Q. And finally, my input and output for the plugin are last represented on this center column. Just above the EQ panel, we have the Dynamics panel, which allows us predictable control over any compressor, limiter, or expander gate plugin. Right now, we have a compressor limiter Dyne 3 plugin brought up, and you can see it, the UI is one-to-one with the controls on D-Command. I can go and grab the knee, ratio, attack, release, makeup gain, or threshold, and control those directly from the plugin. If we go to page 2, I can actually get to my sidechain filters as well. If we had a plugin that had an expander gate, we may need to access the page functions again to get to those functions. Up until now, we've been looking at the Dynamics EQ and Focus Fader section controlling one particular track. These can actually be split out so we can see 3 different types of tracks. For example, let's say we want to focus the lead vocal and look at the EQ only on that channel. I'm going to go and use the Go To function again and bring up track number 49. That brings up my lead vocal, and now I have my EQ, my API 550 EQ on my lead. I'm going to press the lock function to keep that track centered in the equalizer panel. Now what I'd like to do is bring up the submaster. On the submaster, I have a bus compressor, an SSL bus compressor. So I'm going to once again go to Go To, this time focusing the submaster, which is track number 64, bringing that into the Dynamics panel, pressing lock, and now we have the ability to look at simultaneously our 2-bus compressor and also our lead vocal EQ. Now if I wanted to, I could focus a 3rd track, and maybe that is a bass track, for example, into the focus fader. So these are totally independent sections that I can use and I can address individually. We want to next focus on the view mode options for each of the independent channel strips. If you take a look at the center of the channel strip, we have a number of different ways we can look at the data on the strips. Inserts shows us inserts, and we can page up and page down locally through any of those inserts, A through J, on the channel strip. Pan shows us panning parameters, whether it's a mono pan, stereo, LCRS, or 5.1. Sends is going to show us all the 10 sends that live on that particular channel strip. IO view shows us the input and the output assignment for that particular channel. Let's change all of our keyboards over to pan view now by simply pressing pan on each of the channel strips. Now I can certainly use the option modifier and change everybody to one particular view by simply pressing the appropriate view. Let's focus on panning on our channel strips for our keyboards now. I'm going to change over our pianos here to pan view, and you can see I've got a simple mono panner on the piano left-right, as well as on the keyboards left and right. Let's next look at our pad, and our pad actually has a stereo panner. You can see on the encoders that they're linked. If I grab onto one and grab the other encoder, I can actually stretch those out to maintain that left-to-right relationship and place that. Next on the Mellotron track, we have a 5.1 channel, and you can see I have front, rear, center percentage, LFE, and all of my divergence mode controls above that. There's a preference on the desk under Console Preferences Operations. If I dig in here, you can see 2-knob pan is currently set to off. I'm going to engage that. And what that does for me, it allows me from 2 encoders to be able to place that sound source anywhere in the 5.1 space. Essentially, it links the front and the rear position. So with the front And the front rear knob, I can place the sound source anywhere in the 5.1 space. Definitely recommended for D-Command users. The second channel view mode that we're going to look at on the desk is inserts. I'm going to hold down the Option key once again to toggle all of my channels into inserts simultaneously. Now, since D-Command only has 2 encoders, you really need to manage your views on the console. I can see location A and B. I know that I'm on inserts because we use the convention of uppercase letters to indicate inserts A through H across the desk. You can see that I have an SSL channel on my lead vocal at insert location A. Second, I have a hybrid compressor at insert location B, Phoenix, API 550, etc. What I'd like to do now is go to our setups and preferences and set our favorite EQ and compressor up so that we can do quick assignments. So under setups, preferences, and under mixing, I can actually get to a preference for my default EQ and dynamics. And you can set this up to be any Digi-Rack or any third-party plugin you'd like to be that's your go-to EQ and compressor. Now that I've got those set up, I'm going to go and make an assignment on the desk. So now in Insert B, we want to assign our favorite EQ, which happens to be that EQ37. I'm going to press the Select key for location B on our second vocal. By doing that, this takes us into the matrix assign mode, where the whole fader bank of 8 faders and encoders is now being used for an assignment. You can see we're assigning to Track John on Insert B a plugin, and I can choose either a TDM plugin, an RTAS plugin, or I can quickly go and access my favorite EQ or compressor. I'm going to go and choose the EQ37. It makes the assignment and takes me out of the matrix assign mode. I'd like to now go and add that same hybrid compressor that I'm using on the lead vocal to my second vocal. So I'm going to jump back into the matrix assign by pressing the select under A. Since we don't have hybrid compressor set up as our go-to or our favorite compressor, I need to go and dive in deeper and find that within the assignment mode. I'm going to choose TDM first. Now it shows me all my subfolders, all my options of different types of processors. I'm going to go and choose Dynamics. And I'm going to go grab the encoder that says back and find the particular plugin. In this case, it starts with H. And there's hybrid compressor. Now, in this view, if you touch any encoder, it's actually going to show you a full description of that particular plugin name on the encoder strips. So I'm going to go and grab hybrid compressor and assign that. So now I have a hybrid compressor and an EQ37 assigned to my second vocal. Now, at this point, I'd like to actually change that EQ37 band to, let's say, filter bank. So I'm going to hold down select for a couple seconds. It's going to take me back into the local folder that I was in, which is in plugins, specifically EQs. I can now reassign while I'm in this view. Before I do that, I'm going to engage the lock function right over here to allow me to stay in the matrix after I make my assignment. So I'm going to change my EQ37 to a filter bank E6. I'm going to stay in the matrix assign mode, and I'm going to go now and toggle from Insert B to Insert C. I want to add a harmonic plugin to add a little bit of saturation to the lead vocal. So while I'm in the assignment mode, I can now say, let's go to TDM, harmonic, and I'm going to bring up an SPL twin tube on Insert C. I'm going to take my lock off, hit select, and now I've made the assignment. So if we go back, we can see I've got the hybrid compressor, I've got filter bank E6, and then the SPL twin tube on the second vocal channel. And the benefit there is that I can stay on the console, not have to use the keyboard and mouse to get around and choose plugins. And it allows me to make assignments quickly, intuitively, and to really stay in the flow of the creative process while mixing. A few more details about inserts that are unique to the console are global bypass. So if I want to bypass the entire chain of signal processing on the lead vocal, I can simply press the bypass spill button and all the plugins are bypassed. Likewise, I have local bypass for each individual plugin using the BMP button. If we play and take a look at hybrid compressor, I can actually see counterclockwise gain reduction. I can see how hard am I hitting that compressor. And if I hit select to dive into parameter view for that, I can actually see the gain reduction on the meter bridge as well as the output of that channel. And I can also edit the parameters of that compressor plugin from the encoders while I'm in this particular view. The last thing I'm going to mention is that at the top level view of the inserts, if we hold down Command, Option, and Control, I can enable the plugin for automation simply by touching the encoder. Next, let's take a look at Sends view on the channel strips. I'm going to hold down the Option key again and jump into Sends. And if you take a look at the first send across our background vocals, we have S verb. That's actually a string verb, but they're deactivated. And I know that visually because we've got reverse video. The reason they're deactivated is because I created my session template with resources that I know I'm not necessarily going to need. Because they're deactivated, my session's going to load faster. I don't use as many DSP resources. But I've built the infrastructure into the template, so if I need that, I can simply turn it on by using Command Control and the Select key, and it's ready to go. So it's very fast, very efficient. Below the string verb, I have vocal verb, and that's in lowercase. I'm using the convention, all lowercase descriptions are buses. So a sub bus, a verb, a delay, etc. If I roll through now, using the Option key again, using the local page up, page downs, you can see I can get to send point E, and that's Q1. It's an uppercase. I'm using the convention. Uppercase is indicating a physical output path to one of my interfaces, and Q1 is feeding a headphone amp. Now, I want to actually add a second cue to my background vocals, so we're going to go back to the assign matrix and feed the outputs to a second cue. So before we do that, we need to go into select mode and select all of our background vocals. I can press the first one, use shift, and then swipe the range of those. Okay, we're going to now go to our master strip here, and in that master section we have functions like do to selected and do to all. At this point, I'm going to use do to selected to apply the assignment function on one channel to all of my background vocals. Let's dive into send location F by pressing the select key, and now it's brought me into that assign matrix again. And instead of showing plugins, this time we have output and bus. I want to choose an output as we described earlier, and I want to now feed directly to Q2. So I'm going to choose Q2. As you can see on the desk, I very quickly assigned a second headphone cue to Q2 on my background vocals. Now, that master strip also gives me access to local flips. So if I want to balance a headphone cue for Q1, I can flip Q1 down, and I have control over Q1. Those send mutes are right here on the mute channels. Likewise, I have flip 2, and I can bring that second cue down to the channels and balance that second headphone cue if I'd like. Now, it's a true flip, so when I flip down, my channels are on the encoders, my mutes are on the BMP switched function. Now that I've assigned my second cue, we want to actually set a couple properties for that cue. I'm working in solo in place, so I want to make sure when I do a solo on the desk, I'm not cutting one of my headphone cues. So to do that, I need to take a look at the BMP or the switched functions below those cues. Now, the default behavior here is this operates as a mute, so it's a send mute. If I want to turn on pre-fader mode for this cue send, I need to come over here to the master strip and toggle from mute to pre-post. Now I can toggle these individual cues into pre-fader. If you're not sure what that BMP function does, you can press the switched info button momentarily and it'll tell you, hey, that button now is controlling pre-fader, post-fader. So that's a nice way to reference what that's doing. Before we go further, let's go back to do to selected, and instead of pressing that once, I'm going to double press that, and what that does is it latches on, and it allows me to do multiple functions in series without having to press that button again. So for example, I want to turn pre-fader on all of my cues. Maybe I want to page up, page down, and kind of look at some different cues. You can see my view changes happen now on all selected channels. So now what I want to do is I want to drop these sends down to the faders. And I'm going to do that by pressing a select key under one of the cues. Okay, so now, again, there's my cue levels. Now, if we take a look at the UI in Pro Tools, you can see that this encoder now is controlling the send, pan, and we have a function called follow main pan. What that does, if I engage it, it automatically inherits the panning from the channel beneath it. And you can see if I engage it, it's going to shift, it's going to change that panning to look at the channel that send exists on. So now back on the console, I'm going to press the sends button once again to revert back to our previous view where we have Q1 and Q2. And now I have access to my cues. I'm going to pop out of due to selected, and I'm ready to move on. Okay, so next let's take a look at I/O view on the console. This is a unique mode that we added in Pro Tools 8, and it's a way to look at input and output on a channel basis. Now, one of the things it gives you is more visibility into what your assignments are than the software does, especially for multiple outputs. Let's take a look at that. I'm going to hold down the Option key and press sends on one of the channel strips for more than a second. Now what we see is the input and the output of all of our drum tracks. You can see that the drums are going to a bus, again, lowercase convention, called drums. Now a couple of these actually have a plus sign, and that is referring to the fact that it's been multi-assigned. Now there's a great feature here where you can press the BMP button under that output, and it's actually going to spill that multi-assignment. So now I can see that the snare is going to CP drum and drums. Now CP drum, that's actually compressed drums. I think I can make that a little bit more clear. So there's also a way to rename the I/O setup of that bus right from the desk, right while we're in the heat of mixing. I'm going to hold down the control modifier and press the BMP button, and I'd like to just call that crush. I think that's a little bit clearer that that is going to a bus that's going to be compressed or really limited, and we're going to blend that in with the clean. So now, once again, snare is going to crush and drums. Likewise, tom 1 and tom 2, they're going to crush and drums at the same time, okay? So the next thing we want to do is take a look at our overheads. Our overheads are only going to drums. I'd also like to add those into that parallel compression scheme. So how do we do that? We're going to go back to that assign matrix we saw earlier. I'm going to simply go to the overhead left and press the select key under drums. Now we've entered back into the matrix, and you can see that this is currently assigned only to drums. We want to mult it to crush. To do that, in the upper right-hand corner where the lock function is, I can press the switch under the plus, and that stands for mult. Now, while we're in here, before we do anything else, I'm going to also engage lock. And what lock does, it allows me to stay in here after I make my assignment. So let's add crush, and now you can see overhead left is currently going to drums and crush. Now instead of having to get out of the matrix and then get back in, I can simply go up to this encoder and change it from overhead left to overhead right. And now I'm going to do the same exact thing for that. That's going to drums. I also want that to go to crush. I'm going to take my lock off and press crush. Okay, let's spill the overheads. You can see that. And you can see now that the overheads are also going to that compressed crush bus and to the drum bus simultaneously. So you can see the matrix view in conjunction with I/O view is incredibly efficient, especially when making multi-assigned outputs from the console. While we're looking at our drum channel still, let's explore the last view mode that we're going to take a look at. Using the Shift Control modifier in conjunction with the Insert button, I can bring up the heat controls for my individual drum tracks. Now, heat is a new option that you can add to Pro Tools 8.1 harmonically enhanced algorithm technology. It allows you to add harmonics that emulate tape saturation and tube gear to your mix. Now, on the individual channel basis, I can toggle heat either pre-fader or post-fader, as well as bypass or engage that contribution to the entire mix. I also have the ability to control the overall drive and tone for the heat algorithm. Shift Control modifier in conjunction with Custom Faders plugin will bring up the global heat controls. The master controls of heat allow me to toggle a master bypass for the entire algorithm. The drive control, if it's set to 12 o'clock, is essentially neutral and doing nothing. As we go counterclockwise, we're adding odd harmonics which emulate tape saturation. As we go counterclockwise, we're adding odd and even harmonics that adds tube and tape saturation. To make up for some of the high frequency loss due to compression, I can add tone, or if it's too bright, I can subtract tone below with this encoder. Perhaps one of the most powerful and efficient ways to work on D-Command is by taking advantage of the custom fader modes. Custom faders are controlled from the master strip here, and we have 4 different categories of custom faders: Pro Tools Mix Edit Groups, Custom Groups, Tracks, and Custom Plugins. Now, custom faders are all about customization, setting up a view that's appropriate for your workflow. They're totally independent of the rest of your desk. And what that means is that I can carve out a section as small or as large as I'd like to view, for example, tracks or sound effects or effects returns or whatever I'd like to view. And any view changes or banking that I do on the rest of the console are immune to what's going on in the custom fader group. It's an incredibly powerful way to get what you want quickly and efficiently. You will always know that you're in a custom fader mode if you see the blue LEDs on the channels. So the first custom group that we're going to look at is Pro Tools Mix Edit Groups. If I press the Groups button for more than a second, it's actually going to bring up a matrix on the encoders of the main section. Now you can see all of the groups I have in my session: drums, percussion, bass, background, guitars, are all labeled, and you can see the associated group letter with those. If I want to, for example, enable or suspend a group, I can simply use the BMP button, and that will turn that group name reverse video to indicate it's been suspended. You can see the all group right now is not activated. If I want to access a group down on the faders, I can simply press the select key, for example, to bring the drums down to the faders. Now I'm accessing the drum channels from here. From this view, I can easily access any of my different instrument groups quickly. So let's go and grab the background vocals. I'm going to bring those up. Here's all my background vocals. Let's grab my guitars. There's the guitar channels. Let's go and take a look at our drums. There's my drum channels. So instantly accessing those. From the matrix view of the Pro Tools Mix Edit Groups in this view, I can edit or modify the group attributes in Pro Tools software. So by using the option modifier with the select key under a group, I can go in and say, I'd like to actually edit the attributes for my guitar group. So now I can go in and I can change, for example, link, sends, or panning, or some other attribute within that particular group. I can also approach this as a show-hide matrix. For example, maybe I want to edit drums, and I only want to see my drum channels visually in the editor of Pro Tools. I can go and access and look at only those tracks on the timeline. Using the control modifier with the select key under drums, I can show only my drum tracks. Now, if I want to blow those up, I can use Command Option and track size up to fit those perfectly into the edit window. So the Pro Tools Groups function for custom faders is incredibly powerful to access all of your groups, to manage group suspends or enables, even to edit the attributes of the groups. Now that we've looked at accessing groups, let's actually create a group of our own and assign it to a VCA master. So the first thing we want to do is make sure from the master strip that we are in select mode and not focus mode. Now I want to make a group for all of my vocals. I have a group already for lead vocals and for background vocals. So let's make a group that spans every one of our vocal channels. So I'm going to press Daryl, and let's go all the way to the end of all of our vocal channels. Now we need to go over to the soft keys section. The top row we have access to group functions. I'm going to press group, And it allows me now to choose whether I want an edit or a mix-only group. I'm going to create a mix-only group. Now, in Pro Tools, we get a dialog that says, what would you like to call this? And I'm going to call this All Vox. Okay, hit OK. And now I've got a group. We can verify that if we press the Groups button once again. You can see that we've now got an All Vox group, which is group letter H. Now what I'd like to do is actually assign this group to a VCA, which is the next custom fader view that we're going to look at. Now that we've created a new mix group, we want to assign it to a VCA. Now a VCA is a control channel that allows us to, from a single fader, control an entire group in Pro Tools. Before we do that, we want to choose on the desk where that VCA is going to be built, which is important. So if we take a look at our faders, I want to put it just to the right of our vocals and our background VCAs. I'm going to select the V backgrounds channel so that that new VCA is built just to the right of it after my background vocals. And now what I want to do is make a new track. So again, from the soft key section, I can choose track, new track, and I want to choose a VCA master. So you can see now a new VCA was built just to the right of V background. If I double press the select on this VCA 1, it's going to bring up a naming dialog. That naming dialog, I'm going to use the convention lowercase v is a VCA and then the name of the group, in this case All Vox. By using lowercase v, it allows me at a glance on the console to know that that's a VCA master. And now I want to assign that channel, that fader, to the group we created earlier. I'm going to enter I/O view on this channel by holding down sends for more than a second. You can see there's currently no group assigned. By pressing the select key under that, I can enter that assignment matrix once more. Again, the convention is that anything that's previously assigned is showing up in reverse video. So I can see vocals, strings, bass, those have already been assigned. I'm going to roll through and find one that's not assigned. All Vox is available. I'm going to press select, and now this has been paired with All Vox. And you can see all the members of that group are now available vertically on the VCA master. So the VCA master is perhaps one of the most important custom views that you have on Dcommand. Incredibly powerful. First of all, it allows me to trim the overall level of, in this case, all of my drum channels from a single fader. I have individual kick, snare, hats, toms, and then I have my drum VCA to scale all the drums relative to the bass, guitars, keyboards. It also allows me to audition, for example, solo just the acoustic guitars and hear what those are doing, or to mute any other individual group of keys, strings, or vocals. If we look up on the channel strip, all of the slave members of, for example, the keyboard group are vertically on the encoder. So I can see the mellotron, I can see the pad. The encoder actually controls the level of that keyboard. The BMP functions as a mute for that particular keyboard element. And then the select button acts as a focus. So if I wanted to quickly get to the snare drum, I can go up above the drums VCA, hit select on snare, and now I have access to the SSL channel for dynamics and EQ tweaking of the snare drum. Incredibly powerful, efficient, and very quickly get the element you need to focus on the console. On a smaller configuration of Dcommand, for example, an 8-fader unit, you may want to access VCAs from the second custom fader view, which is called tracks. If we go and press tracks, you can see now all my VCAs live as custom faders in the center section. If I want to spill, I can do so from any of the members, and then those groups are going to show up in the custom fader section. To jump back to VCAs, I can press the tracks button again and get back to the top level control of all of my instrument subgroups. Now, tracks is essentially showing a certain track type in a custom fader view. I can choose between any of the available track types in my session, including auxes, master faders, audio tracks, MIDI tracks, even hidden tracks are viewable on the console in a custom fader group. The next custom fader mode we're going to explore are custom fader groups. Now, this is not to be confused with a Pro Tools mix or edit group. It is a group that is totally unique to Dcommand or Dcontrol, and I can populate a group with any channels in any order with any view I'd like to see. So we're going to do that now. To get there, I'm going to hold down the Groups button for more than a second under Custom Fader Controls. Now, it's going to default back to where we were, which was Mix, Edit, Groups. So I press the Bank Cycle button once, and then Groups again, and you can see the Focus Channel scribble says Custom 1, so we are in Customs. Now I'm going to hold down the Command modifier and press Groups to say I'd like to edit this group. So it's flashing to indicate we're ready to go. Now I want to put some key channels in my session for my tune into this group. Things like lead vocal, kick, snare, maybe the primary melodic element, which in this song is an acoustic guitar. So those are the things I'm going to populate into this group. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go find those elements to put into the group. And you can see, again, custom faders are immune to any bank or view changes on the rest of the desk. So the first thing I want to do is find the lead vocal. That's the most important thing in the session. So there it is, and I'm going to press that. And you can see it flew into the far right-hand channel. Now, I want multiple entries of that lead vocal, and I'm going to show you why in a second. To do that, I'm going to hold down the Shift modifier and press Daryl 2 more times. Okay? So lead vocal is there. Now let's add kick, snare, and then our primary acoustic guitar. So I'm going to scroll back, and we're going to add the kick, the snare, and let's also grab that primary acoustic. And we'll grab bass too. Okay? Now that I've got the channels I want, I am going to press the Groups button again to confirm my group has been created. The last thing I'm going to show you for this view is to rename the group, the custom fader group. And to do that, I'm going to hold down the Option key, press the Groups button. So let's name this custom group. We're just going to call it Super, for lack of a better name. And now you can see that show up on the focus channel. Now, let's take a look at those 3 lead vocals. The reason we added 3 is that we have the ability to now see 3 different things about the lead vocal. So I'm going to come up to the channel strip views, and for example, I want to see some of the sends specifically to both a delay and to a vocal verb. So now I've got the delay for the lead vocal, and I've got the verb, and maybe I want to also see compressor parameters for that lead vocal. I can dive into the hybrid compressor and see 3 different things for my primary lead vocal. Now, with the kick, snare, and the acoustic, maybe I want to look at the top-level insert so I can see gain reduction on the kick. Do the same thing on the snare. Maybe on the acoustic, I actually want to look at the panning for now. And then the bass, I'm going to bring up, I'm going to dive into the parameters for SansAmp. All these settings are now remembered when I exit out of this view and come back to custom faders. It's a great way to be able to get to key elements or channels in your session quickly. Now that we've got the 3 different views for our lead vocal and our custom fader group, it'd be nice to be able to have control over that delay send and that verb send from the channel faders. I can accomplish that by using the map function. If I hold and press map for more than a second, it's going to flash. Now I need to go and touch the encoder representing the send I want to drop down. Press map again to confirm, and now you've got your lead vocal, you've got the parameters for your compressor, and you've got sends to those primary effects on that lead vocal. If I want to do an automation move and maybe swell up a delay at one specific time in the song, I can do that. Custom fader groups are incredibly powerful in that I can create a unique group that houses the critical elements in my session in the view I'd like to see them in. I can do automation from flipped parameters, for example, these sends to effects on the lead vocal. I can also import or export these custom fader groups from the Pro Tools session document into or out of templates that I create for my Dcommand. So we're taking a look at the custom faders tracks view again on Dcommand, and we're seeing all of our primary groups of instruments: drums, bass, guitars, keyboards. Now, if you take a look below the custom fader controls, we have a bank cycle button. and that's lit to indicate that I have more members, more VCAs than I can see in this 8-fader group. If I press bank cycle, on the second page, I've actually set up my template so that I have some global functions like control of all my effects returns, all of my subgroups or my auxes, all of my cue masters, and finally all of my print tracks or my stem tracks. So let's dive into a couple of these and take a look at what they're doing. Effects returns. If I spill effects returns, you can see I've got string verb, vocal verb, delay, drum verb, chorus, guitar verb, and you can see the associated insert or plugin above on the encoder. Now, let's take a look at subs real quick. We'll spill into our subs. Those are effectively our auxes. If I wanted to compress all the background vocals, all the drums, for example, I would do that on my subgroup. In addition to the subgroups, I also have cues. So I can spill in and I can look at all of my 3 stereo cue masters. I even have some limiters on those channels for protection for my talent. Now, let's go back lastly and take a look at our print VCA. And if I spill into print, these are effectively all my stems. Now, I may not always be printing stems for my music session, but if I need to, again, the point is the infrastructure is built. I don't have to go and route and create new tracks. It's already set up in my template. So if I want to print drum stem and keyboard stem, I just track arm those as I'm working and I'm ready to go. I've created that already. Again, I'm always listening through my final 2-bus print track, and that's here. This is the P mix. I'm using the convention lowercase p for print or a stem, just like we use lowercase v for VCA and lowercase s for a subgroup. And again, I'm always listening through that 2 mix, that final print track. The last thing I want to mention in this view is that we've actually got blank spacers you can see here. And what we've done to create this is simply make VCA masters in our session that are not assigned and simply give them no name or a blank name. And then we can use them to space out important elements in our view. So the fourth or final custom fader mode we're going to explore is custom faders plugins. Before we get there, we're still looking at our VCAs. I'm going to spill my VFX so that I can see all of my effects returns. And I'd like to go and I'd actually like to access my guitar verb. So to do so, again, I'm going to make sure I'm in focus mode and I'm going to select guitar verb. Press the custom fader mode button for plugin. We've accessed the revibe on our guitar effects return. And we have basically all of the parameters spilled on the encoders. So I've got time, I've got pre-delay, size, spread. I can get to any one of those parameters right up on the encoders. A plugin like Revibe has a ton of different parameters, but oftentimes there's 5 or 6 key elements that you need to control within that plugin. So to do that, we can actually create a custom fader map. I'm going to go and press the map button from the custom fader controls. And now I can pick the important elements or parameters from Revibe that I want accessible all the time. The first thing I'm going to do is press the select on the first channel strip of the custom fader view. Now I need to associate the parameter to drop down. In this case, I want pre-delay first, so I'm going to touch pre-delay. The second thing I'm going to do is do select on the second channel, and now I'm going to grab decay time. Let's grab size, early reflection levels, reverb level. We can even page through and find things on the next pages. Let's go grab spread. And then lastly, I want to get the high frequency cut. Okay? So I've got those key elements that I can now control from the faders. Now, another unique aspect of the desk is that I can go in and I can actually export this as a file. A lot of times there's multiple users working on one console, different guys like a different layout and different parameters for the same plugin. You can create a map file, save it with your name, and every plugin that you own is now associated with that plugin file. So it's a really great way to swap between different users on the same desk. If you hold down the plugin button from the custom fader controls for more than a second, you're going to get to a second page of functions like bypass, compare, safe, and even automation enabling parameters directly from Revibe. The last option about custom plugins I want to mention in this view is the lock function. We talked about lock earlier with dynamics and EQ, but lock is actually really useful. What it allows me to do if I lock off this section is, for example, jump back to a custom fader group mode where, for example, I'm controlling my acoustic guitars. And I want to add a little bit of guitar verb. I want to tweak the sends that are feeding that guitar verb. Now, if I focus any one of these guitar channels, I've now lost that effects return. I can go and EQ those guitars, but now I'm going to have to go refocus that effects return to be able to get back to that guitar reverb plugin. If I've locked it, I don't have that problem. I can go press the plugin, and I'm back in context tweaking that guitar verb. And I can easily switch between plugin and group to go access, send amount to the plugin, and the actual plugin controls. I'm going to show one more example of custom fader plugins. We're going to jump back to our VCA view quickly to be able to access our bass guitars. I'm going to spill the bass guitars, and you can see we have bass 1 and bass 2. On bass 2, we actually have a SansAmp plugin, and there's actually a second way to access custom plugins without having to first focus the channel. Using the Command Option modifier, I can simply press the select below SansAmp and jump straight into custom fader plugins on that second bass track. Now you can see this is a pretty simple plugin which only has a single row of 8 parameters. A lot of plugins are like this, and I don't want to have to spend the time to create a map. So what I can do is I can do what we call a local flip. If I use the control modifier, I can press the flip button and drop that single row of parameters down to the faders. And now I have quick access, easy control of all the parameters in SansAmp on my faders. In addition to that, I can hold down the Command key and hit any one of the page up, page down buttons to quickly roll through presets in the plugin. So maybe I want to get it in the right ballpark with a plugin preset, and then I want to tweak further from there. So this is a great way to quickly jump in, control a plugin on the faders, and then jump back to, for example, the VCA view to work on a different element in our tune. So Pro Tools 8 added a great new feature called plugin mapping. And what it allows us to do is to lay out the plugin parameters for any plugin, for example, a compressor, the way I want to see them on the channel strip. It's great to access dynamics and EQs from the center sections, but what if I wanted to see compressors across all of my drum channels vertically? That's where plugin mapping comes into play. So let's take a look at that on our lead vocals. We're starting with VCA Masters once again as our kind of home base. From there, I'm going to spill my lead vocals, and you can see I've got a hybrid compressor from Waves on that lead vocal. Now, what we're going to do is I'm going to first jump in with the Command Option modifier to custom plugin modes on that hybrid compressor. Now, I could certainly lay out the parameters with plugin mapping on the encoders in this custom plugin view if I wanted to. I'm more concerned about the channel strip. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go into Learn mode. I'm going to use the Control modifier with the Map button to enter Learn mode for the hybrid compressor. Now, we don't want to map it in the custom fader view here. We're going to actually exit out of that and go back to our lead vocal and dive into hybrid compressor. You can actually see that it's blank. There are no parameters being displayed there. And likewise, if we look over at the dynamic section, it says no control. There's no parameters mapped yet. So what we're going to do is we're going to use the ability to choose source and destination. So I'm going to touch the parameter from the center section, from the dynamics controls, and place them where I'd like to see them on the channel strip. So the first thing that's important to me is threshold. I'm going to touch the threshold. You can see that turns red, and I want to place that on the bottom encoder. There's threshold. Okay. The next thing that's important to me is ratio. So I'm going to touch ratio, and I'm going to place that above it. Now, one of the cool things you can do in plugin mapping is have 2 different parameters per encoder. So if I toggle the select button, I can actually put makeup gain on this encoder now. So there's makeup gain. I'm going to touch that on the back side of the threshold. Likewise, for ratio, I'm going to use, this particular plugin has a mix percentage, so I can actually blend the clean in with the compressed. I'm going to do mix percentage and put that there. Okay? So that's 4 parameters on one page. I'm going to hit the page up button to go to the second page, and very simply, I'm going to put attack and release next. So attack and release. Okay, we got a couple more things to map and we're done. On the second section of release, I'm going to add punch, which is really a unique property to this particular plugin. And then on the second page of attack, I don't have any more controls to map, so I'm actually going to go look at the plugin UI, and I can actually see all the available parameters to map. In this case, I'd like to actually get the analog modeling mode, and I'm going to grab that and then simply touch the encoder. Okay, so now that we've got that mapped, let's take another look at the plugin interface. And the first thing I'm going to do is turn Learn off, because we've got all the parameters we want. Now I'm going to rename this map, so if I use it again, I know what it is. I'm going to call this H-comp.1. .1 for mono. It's a mono instance. And I'm also going to dig into here and hide the factory pages. I don't want to see the factory pages on the parameter view. And I also want to set this as default, which means anytime I pull up a hybrid compressor, this is the way it's going to be laid out. So now back on the console, if we go and dive into another hybrid compressor, I can see I've got threshold, I've got ratio. Again, if I pop into threshold with the select button, I've got that output, that makeup gain. If I go to page 2, I've got attack and release. I can tweak the punch, and I can also tweak that analog modeling mode. So plugin mapping now allows me to customize the parameter layout of any plugin I want on the channel strips or in a custom fader plugin view. It allows me the same predictability of control that I have with the dedicated dynamics in EQ sections for any plugin in my arsenal.
Alright, welcome to SA Atlanta's tutorial video on the D-Command control surface. We're going to go through a lot of different things with this board, how to set up a mic, both in the overdub booth that we have here at the school as well as in the control room. Go over a lot of the functionality of the board, but to start out, I think I just want to kind of break it down, show the individual sections, kind of go top to bottom on the channel strips, and then we'll talk about the master main section here too. So right off the bat, looking at our channel strips that we have, right up top we have our meter displays. Right, regular volume meters just like you would see on the mix window in Pro Tools. That's the whole idea of the D-Command, is that you're pretty much looking at the mix window. So it takes Pro Tools and it turns it into a hardware mixer feeling kind of control surface. Okay? So meters up top, right below that we have the rotary encoder section. We use those rotaries for a lot of different things on this board. By default, usually we're set up for pan control, but if we go just below the encoders, we have the channel strip mode control buttons right here. So these buttons underneath the rotaries are basically establishing what it is that the rotaries are actually controlling right now. So on most of the channels right now they're set to pan. If we wanted to look at the inserts that we had, what plugins were on it, we can hit the insert button right there and it'll show us we have EQ on the first insert point, compressor on the second insert point, and you can see the LEDs kind of going a little crazy right there. They're actually showing you the amount of gain reduction that's happening right now. So we use the rotary encoders for a lot of different things, mainly pan, both looking at our insert levels as well as opening up new plugins on the channel strips, sends, both creating and controlling the level of our sends for reverbs, delays, all our time-based effects that we would be using in parallel, and a few other things too that we'll see as we kind of dig in a little bit more. Right below the channel strip mode controls, we have our channel strip function controls. These are all the usual controls you're used to seeing on the mix window in Pro Tools. Record arming of a track, input monitoring the track, solo, mute, and then this select button right here, which could be depending on how we have it set up, selecting the track in Pro Tools or actually focusing the channel so that we can get our plugins on the controls in the main unit here also. Moving down below that, scribble strip with the name of the track, and then automation controls right here. So if we wanted to actually automate a volume fade out or something like that, this is where we can actually change the mode of the channel to write, touch, latch, or read, right, depending on what we're trying to go for. And then on both the D command and D control, on the bottom of the section here, we actually have the modifier keys. Same things that you're used to seeing on the keyboard for a Mac. Command, Option, Control, and Shift. So if you think about how you would normally be doing something with the keyboard and mouse, you can really kind of just apply that directly to the D command here also. So for instance, if I held Option and clicked on a fader with my mouse, it would put that fader right back to 0, right back to Unity. I could do the same thing with the D command. Hold Option, touch on a fader, and it puts it right back to 0, right back at Unity. Now looking at the main unit for the D command, first off, vertically we have right here on the left side of the main unit is the channel strip master section, and a lot of those controls actually also come across the top over here. So we have some automation controls, we have assignment controls for opening up plugins on the insert points, creating sends, controlling levels, that kind of stuff. We also have these flip buttons right here, which what these will do, if you hit them, is take whatever control was on the rotary encoder. So for instance, right now we're looking at the send going to bus 1 and 2. So if I hit that flip switch, it takes that send and puts it down on the fader. It flips the fader and that rotary encoder. Alright, again, if I do it down here, it takes whatever's on that second row of encoders, puts it on the fader, then the fader actually ends up here on the rotary encoder section. So this whole channel strip master section is going to be used for a lot of controls, creating new plugins, inserts, sends, removing them, making them inactive, a lot of that kind of stuff. Just to the right of the channel strip master section here, we have our dynamic section. The D command and the D control both have dedicated hardware control sections for dynamic plugins, which are going to be your compressors, limiters, expanders, and gates, as well as EQ plugins right down here. So the way you can establish which plugin you're looking at, because right now on this particular session I actually have an EQ and a compressor on every single channel. In our channel strip master section we have this little mode switch right here, so we can go back and forth between select and focus, and that's establishing what these green select buttons are actually doing. So if I have that set to focus and I focus a channel, it's going to pull that channel's EQ and that channel's compressor into the main unit here. We're always looking at the plugin for the focused channel right here. We'll dig in a little deeper into that later on in the video. Below the EQ section we have transport controls, pretty much all the same stuff you would see on the transport window in Pro Tools. You have physical buttons and controls for it right here at the bottom of the D command. Going back up to the top over here we have our monitor section. So this is going to be controls for the speakers in the control room, controls for headphone mixes for our artists, as well as headphone mixes in the control room here too for mixing and I want to use headphones. I have that ability with this console. So in our particular setup here at SAE Atlanta, we only have one set of speakers, so we always want to be monitoring off of the main right here. Now you can actually have up to 3 different sets of speakers connected, and that's just going to switch you between your 3 sets. But we, again, only have one set in this room, so we're always listening or feeding the main monitors. Volume control for our speakers, and then above that is basically the source. What are we listening to on the speakers? Again, most of the time, probably main. If you have a laptop or phone or something like that patched into the Xmon, we can actually select multiple external sources that we could listen to aside from Pro Tools. But remember, main means you're listening to Pro Tools up top, and main on the bottom means you're actually feeding the Blue Sky speakers in here. To the right of that, this is our headphone mix control right here, the Q setup for our artists. So up top, we have a lot of different Q sends that we can control, essentially. We have Q1 and Q2, which would be 2 separate isolated headphone mixes for our artists. Studio LS, which would be if there were loudspeakers in the live room, we would use that to control the level going there. And then phones is actually for the headphone plug built directly into the D command. That would be if we were listening to headphones in the control room. phones is what we'd want to control. So basically this knob right here can control a lot of different things. The phones, Q1, Q2, and the studio loudspeakers all being controlled by the same rotary encoder right there. So if we were setting up a headphone mix for our artist in the vocal booth, we'd want to select Q1, turn our level up for Q1, and then the source for it, right? We got to look at the little scribble strip right here. If we use Q1, that means that we're using a separate send in Pro Tools, going to output 7 and 8 as our source. If we want to send the artist just a copy of the same thing that we're hearing in the control room, just keep hitting source until it says main right there. That means we're sending a copy of the main mix Pro Tools outputs to the artist in the vocal booth. And then also want to make sure we activate it. You got to make sure you actually turn on the Q mix there. And then moving over to the right, talkback. There's a talkback microphone built into the D command, so we want to make sure we're set to internal for our talkback. Turn the level up a little bit, and then I would recommend keeping auto talkback turned off. What that'll do is every time that Pro Tools is stopped, it'll automatically turn the talkback on. Can sometimes be a little more of a hassle than an ease actually. So our talkback button is actually down by the transport controls on the bottom left of the main unit. So if we find where we have our transport, just to the left, talkback button, press and hold to talk, or double click it and it'll latch and stay on until you click it again. And room here, we're using the Digidesign 8-channel pre for microphone preamp. So I just want to give a quick little overview on how to actually control this unit right here, because it can be a little bit confusing upon first glance. 8 channels, only one volume control for it, so you have to use these select buttons going across the bottom. So if we have our microphone plugged into channel 1, we want to make sure we select channel 1 for the mic preamp. This obviously knob would be our gain control for it. Source right here, what do we have plugged into it? We have actual DI quarter-inch connections built into the front of this, so if we wanted to plug a guitar or bass directly into it, we want to make sure the source is set to instrument. If you're recording off of a keyboard or MPC, laptop, something like that, we want to make sure line is our source. Recording off a microphone, obviously mic, we want to be the source there. And then input Z is impedance. This actually kind of works as a nice little tone control in a lot of ways. Kind of mess with that a little bit when you're sound checking just to get the best possible sound coming off your microphone for that voice or whatever it is you're recording. So everything else that we want to control, phantom power, high pass filter, pad, polarity reversal, all that stuff is all vertical above each of these 8 channels right here. So each one of these buttons right here will correspond to one of these controls. 48 volt phantom power, turning the insert point for this preamp on and off, pad for the mic, phase reverse, and high pass filter all right there. So we select the channel. If I want to turn on phantom power, hit that 48 volt button right there. It gives me the red light showing me that 48 power is on. Polarity reverse, right? And if I go over and select channel 2, hit the same button, phantom power for channel 2, and on down the line. So it's all about which channel you have selected is the one that you're actually controlling at that point. Okay, so before we actually go in and plug in a mic and start recording with this console, I want to show you guys how to actually set it up in Pro Tools so that the D command is actually controlling Pro Tools, as well as that Digidesign preamp that we looked at too. All of that can be mapped and controlled by the software. So to set this stuff up, first thing we want to do is go to the Setup menu in Pro Tools and select the Peripherals menu. All right. The D command is Ethernet based, that's how it connects to the computer. So when you pull up the Peripherals menu, go to the tab that says Ethernet Controllers. And I'm going to start by actually enabling it. When we click that checkbox, Pro Tools starts scanning to see if it sees any controllers plugged into the Ethernet ports of the computer. Once it's done doing that, we should see the D command as an option in our little drop-down boxes below. So number 1 right here, we'll select D control main section. And then the second one we select the D command fader section on that. Additionally, as I mentioned, the preamp that we have in this room, the 8-channel Digi preamp, can also be controlled by Pro Tools. So if we click on the mic preamps tab, we'll go here and we'll select the type is the Digi Pre, that's actually the model, and then we have it connected via a Motu MIDI Express port. That's how it actually does the control, is all through MIDI protocol. So it's going to be port 1, channel 1 for both the receive from and the send to selections on this. Okay. Once we have those two things set up, we should be good with the peripherals menu. So I'm going to hit OK. At that point, you should see the D command pop to life and actually kind of be a mirror image of what you have on the mix window in Pro Tools. But when it comes to the microphone preamp, there's still one more step that we have to do. We have to tell Pro Tools which inputs are being fed by it. So we're going to, again, go to the Setup menu in Pro Tools. This time we're going to select the I/O menu. Alright, and I/O, we have input, output, bus, insert, and mic preamps on the tab there. Since we already set up the pre, it shows up as an option, but again, we have to tell Pro Tools which inputs it's actually corresponding to. So it's actually just 1 through 8 in this room. So you click on one, it automatically fills that in, and that should be the last step. We hit OK here, and now both the D command and the microphone preamp should both be set up for control within Pro Tools. So now if we look at the mix window, we can see the preamp controls show up. If you're not seeing these controls that I have right here, you can actually pull up a separate little window for it. If you go to the View menu, Mix Window Views, and make sure that mic preamps is checked, then we can see all those controls. So once we select an input for a channel, for instance 1 and 2, since this is a stereo channel we're looking at right now, we select inputs 1 and 2. Since we mapped it, Pro Tools already knows that the first 2 channels of the preamp are controlling inputs 1 and 2 in Pro Tools. So now I can automatically go here, I can turn on phantom power directly from the mix window, high pass filters, switch it between mic, line, DI, all of those controls that we saw right on the front of the preamp, I can actually control right from Pro Tools now, so I never have to actually leave the mix position as I'm working. I can do everything from the software. Okay, so now when you come in to record a vocal or instrument or something like that using our overdub booth here at SAE, the main thing with this room is you just got to make sure you plug into the right connection. So I really want to kind of just focus on the panel that we have in here. So this little booth is actually wired into 6 different control rooms. All right, control room number 2 is our SSL studio. Studio 3, 4, 5, and 6 are the sequencing rooms. And then control room 7 is the D command. So that's the one we're interested in using right now. So we can see them numbered 13, 14, 15, 16. Doesn't really matter which one you plug into, just remember which one you plugged into because it makes a difference when you go to patch the signal into the preamp. And then on the right hand side here, we have all the Q sends. Alright, so when we send our headphone mix out, this is where it's going to come into the booth here. So let's go ahead and plug in our headphone box using the Control Room 7 Q sends. Q1 and Q2 is really just left and right. It's not 2 different Q sends. And then we'll take our microphone and we'll just go to Control 7 tie line number 13. And then at this point, as long as you've already got those connected to the headphone box and the microphone, you should be good to head back into the control room and finish setting up from there. Alright, we're back in the D command control room now. We got our microphone plugged in and we got our headphone box plugged in. But now we need to patch the microphone signal into the preamp. So on the right side of the patch bay, we're looking for overdub 3 tie lines. On the patch bay, they're actually labeled 1, 2, 3, and 4, but 1 actually corresponds to tie line as it's labeled in the booth 13, 2 to 14, 3 to 15, 4 to 16. So just going to go ahead and patch from number 1, because we were in tie line 13, and bring it down to the pre-mic input number 1. And that should really be the only patching that we have to do as far as the headphone mix, the Q send, all that is normal on the patch bay. This should really be the only patch that we'll have to make to record this microphone today. So now that we've got the microphone patched into the preamp, now it's time to actually set our inputs in Pro Tools and arm the track for recording so that we can set our level on the preamp. So on the D command, pretty much everything we can do with the keyboard and mouse, for the most part, we can do right on the control surface itself. So we can actually set the input for our vocal track that we have right here using our rotary encoders. So if we go to our channel strip master section, right above the monitor section here, we have a little square called the assign section. So what we want to assign right now is the input to the track. We patched it into microphone preamp input number 1, which is going to come to Pro Tools input 1. So we want to make sure we assign input, and then we're going to go over to our vocal track here, and on the rotary encoder right here is where we're actually going to assign which input from the interface we want for this microphone. So since I've already turned on the assign inputs button, I can go ahead and start turning the knob here, and I can select either a bus or interface or no input. Since we're using an external sound source, a microphone, we want interface as our selection. So we dial it into interface, hit select, and then as we start turning the encoder now, we can see all the different inputs. We have 8 different analog inputs available on this board. Since we're using input 1, I'm selecting A1, hit select again. That activates the input for that channel. And then we're going to go back over to the master section here and turn off the assign inputs button. Alright, so at this point, input 1 has been assigned for our vocal channel here. So I'm going to go ahead and record arm and input monitor the track so that we can start dialing in some level on the preamp. So now we're looking at Pro Tools, and we can see that we've already assigned input A1 as the input to the track. That's what we just did on the rotary encoders for the D command. And we also record armed and set input monitoring on the track. So remember, we brought the mic preamp section up top here into view by going up to the view menu, going to mix window views, and making sure mic preamps was selected. As long as that's there, we should see all of our controls for our mic preamp available here. So I'm going to click right here, pull up a separate little window for the mic preamp. Since we're using the U87 microphone, obviously we don't want line as our input source, we want mic. We want to turn on phantom power, since it is a condenser microphone. And then, since we're tracking vocals, most of the time I want the high pass filter on too, just to remove some of that low rumble. So all those controls that we had right on the front of the microphone preamp, we can control right here inside of Pro Tools. So now we just need to go ahead and turn up the level, and just keep an eye on the meter in Pro Tools, make sure we're not really anywhere near clipping. As long as we're getting into kind of this light green section, I'm usually pretty happy. In fact, I could probably even turn it down a notch. Okay, so we've got our level dialed in. Now we want to actually set the headphone mix. So we're going to send a copy of what we're listening to in the control room to the headphone mix in Overdub 3. So in the monitor section here in the main unit, right next to our control for our speakers, we have our Q controls right here. So Q1 is what's feeding the overdub booth. So we want to make sure we have Q1 selected right here. We want to go ahead and turn that up a little bit. And then on the source button right below it, we have 2 options which show up on the scribble strip right here. So we can send them a copy of the main mix, which is abbreviated MN, or if we keep hitting that source button, toggles back and forth between an isolated Q1 send, which would be output 7 and 8 with our configuration. So we could actually create a separate isolated headphone mix by using output 7 and 8 in Pro Tools. Or if we just want to send them a copy of the same thing we're hearing in the speakers, make sure it says main right there. Right? We need to turn the Q on, and obviously we want to assign the talkback to it also so that we can actually communicate with the artist. And then off to the right, here's our talkback section. So I want to make sure we're using the internal talkback mic built into the board. Go ahead and turn that up a little bit, and we should be good to go as far as our headphone mix is concerned. Okay, so a little variation here. If you're actually going to have the microphone in the control room with you as opposed to using the overdub booth, maybe you have to engineer your own session or something like that. It's almost the same process, just a few little differences. Number one, since we'll have to go into the patch bay with the microphone, you need to get an XLR female to TT adapter cable right here. And you'll just take the end from the microphone to that, and then we'll just patch it directly into the patch bay. Same patch point, we're going into the microphone mic input number 1 with it. Right, so now we've got our mic signal coming in the same way that it was coming in before, but the headphone mix is going to be different. The D command actually has a dedicated headphone jack on it. It's actually on the bottom of the console. And in this room, if you kind of go in right where the keyboard is, that's where you'll find the 1/4" plug for the headphones. So we can actually just go in and plug into the console right here. And now we've got our headphone connection. But in the main section, where we're looking at our Qs here, we're no longer using Q1 input anymore. Instead of using Q1, we want to select phones. This little phones selection right here is dedicated just for that little headphone jack that's on the bottom of the D command. So select phones, again go to source, probably want to just have the source be the main mix since that's what we're already hearing in the control room anyway. Again, make sure we have some level turned up. This is going to be your volume control for the headphones in the control room. And obviously when you have the microphone in the control room, you got to be very careful with feedback. So anytime you have that microphone armed, you have it coming in and it's live in Pro Tools, make sure you mute the speakers or at least turn them all the way down. We don't want to get any feedback. We've got the microphone plugged in, everything's been recorded. So now let's take a look at some of the kind of more mix related features of this board. This is definitely an introductory video. I'm not going to get too deep into it, but I do want to show you kind of some of the basic functions that the D command has. So we have our vocal on this channel strip right here. So let's say maybe we want to add an EQ to that vocal. So we need to first open up an EQ on one of the insert points there. So we can go to our channel strip mode controls right here. Let's change our view of the rotary encoders to inserts. And right now there's no inserts open on it, so it's just showing me the letter corresponding to that insert point. So to actually create the plugin, we're going to go over to the main section here. Right above the monitor section we have the assign box that we use to create the input, but this time we're going to hit assign insert. Once we hit that, it basically puts all the channels on the D command into the mode where you can open up plugins on their insert points. So I'm going to go to my vocal track here, start turning my rotary encoder, and we see 3 different options. Well, really 4, because there's no insert. We can select a DSP plugin, since we are running Pro Tools HDX in this room. We can select a native plugin, or we could actually select a hardware insert, which would mean we're actually using outboard gear. So I'm going to go back to DSP. Hit select, and that brings us to another menu where we go through the different categories of plugins that we have. EQ, dynamics, pitch shift, reverb, delay, modulation, on down the line. All the different plugin categories we have available. We want an EQ, so I'm going to go to the EQ category, hit select again, and now as I turn the rotary encoder, it's showing me the different plugins that are available within the EQ category. So I'm going to open up the stock Avid EQ37 band, so I just move that rotary encoder till that plugin pops up, hit select again, and now that plugin is actually open and active on that channel. So I'm going to go back over here in that main section, turn off the assign inserts mode. So now we can go back to actually seeing the insert points, and we can see that the EQ37 band is on the channel. Okay? So now to actually manipulate that EQ, right? Again, we're going to try and not use the keyboard and mouse here. So if we focus our vocal channel, when we hit that button in the main section here, it can see that there's an EQ plugin on that channel and it automatically pulls that EQ up. If you want to see the window for it, kind of down on the bottom right in the EQ section, you can actually show and hide the plugin window in Pro Tools if you want to see it. And then you just have your normal EQ controls. Up top you have your Q, which is your bandwidth, frequency selects down here, boost and cut controls, so you can just go ahead and kind of start doing your EQ thing right there. If we had opened up a compressor plugin, it would show up right here in the dynamic section and we would have the same ability right there. Okay, so let's say we've gone through, we've done our EQ, we've done our compression, now we want to add some reverb to this vocal also. So going back over to our channel strips here, we have our vocal, right next to it we have an aux that's available to us so that we can use a reverb for it. So in order for us to use reverb properly, we want to use a parallel send, which means now we need to actually create a send on our vocal track to feed the aux. So we'll go back up to our mode controls, and instead of looking at inserts, now we're going to look at sends. We're going to go back up to the assign section, and we're going to tell the D command that we want to assign a send. Okay? On the vocal channel, I'm going to use bus 1 and 2, so I start turning the rotary encoder on my vocal channel, and I can select a physical output or a bus, which is what we want for internal routing with Pro Tools. So select that, and then we can go through and select the specific bus that we want to use. I'll just use bus 1 and 2 for this reverb. So bus 1 and 2 on the scribble strip, hit select. Now that send is created. I'll exit out of the assign sends mode in our master section here, and we have our send now on the vocal channel. I can go ahead and turn that up a little bit so that we'll hear it. Now, to the aux. Right? On the aux channel, now we need to select bus 1 and 2 as the input to that aux, and we need to actually open up a reverb plugin on it. So first thing I'm going to do is assign the input. So again, we're going back to our assign section here in the master section. I'm assigning input, go to my aux channel strip, and I'm going to select bus 1 and 2. So select bus first, and then bus 1 and 2 is the bus I want to use. Hit select. That is now the input to the aux. Alright, so now we want to open up a reverb plugin on it. So I just displayed the inserts on the aux channel right here, and I'm going to assign an insert. Alright, same way as I did with the EQ, it's just this time I'm going to end up selecting a reverb plugin. I'll go native this time. EQ, dynamics, pitch shift, reverb. Hit select, and so now here's all my options for the different reverb plugins we have. I'm going to go to the Reverb from Waves, hit select, and now that reverb plugin is open on the channel. I'm going to exit out of the assign inserts mode right here, and if we look at the screen in Pro Tools, we can see all the changes that we just made. To see all the changes we just made on the D command. So here's the EQ that we opened up on our vocal channel right here. The send going to bus 1 and 2 that we created. We have our aux track right here. Here, bus 1 and 2 set as the input, and reverb on the insert point for it. So we've got our EQ, we've got our reverb, and now we're pretty good, ready to go. That's how you're going to create your inserts, your plugins, how to create your sends, input and output routing. There's a lot that you can do with this D command. It really is a matter of, now that you've kind of seen the basics, kind of starting to dig in, looking at the manual and that kind of stuff to really see how this thing can shine and really improve your workflow in Pro Tools. So one last thing I want to show you before we end this tutorial video, and I want to do a little bit of automation. So we're going to automate a fade out on the master fader right here. All right, but we're going to go back, we're going to see everything done on the D command itself. Alright, so now we've got our master fader channel right here on the D command. So automation on this control surface is actually very, very simple. Right next to the fader we have little LEDs here indicating what automation mode we're in. So right now the master fader is set to read. If we want to record new automation, we need to change it to write. Since this is our first pass, we're going to use write. So right above it you see you have an auto button. If we hit that, it's going to start toggling through the different automation modes that are available. So I'm just going to hit it until we have that red LED up top for write. So that means that essentially this track is now record armed just for automation. So it's set to write. I'm going to go ahead and just hit play in Pro Tools and then go ahead and pull the fader down. And it's recording my moves as I pull the fader down. Once I have my fade out done, I can hit stop. Alright. Fader jumps back because we went back to the beginning of the song, but I want to change it back to read. Okay? The automation mode read is the only one where you can guarantee it's only going to play back automation. It'll prevent you from accidentally writing any new automation. So again, I'm going to go back to that auto button up top here and just hit that until it goes back to read. And now if I hit play, we should have our master fader fade out.